Thanks everybody for coming out this evening. How you doing? How many folks, I'm interested, it's been a while since we've done a RIDE event in Charlotte. How many folks, is this your first RIDE event? Most of the crowd. Well, thank you very much for coming out. My name is Tom Snyder. Myself and a couple of colleagues created a little meetup group 9 years ago, a little over 9 years ago, called the Raleigh Internet of Things Meetup. And our goal was to bring people together to talk about this fundamental shift from the information economy, the internet age, this idea of having everything accessible from these little computers that we carry around in our pockets and the laptops and desktops and things that we use, to this kind of world of real-time automation and data. So how do you use data, maybe on a wearable, to automate the healthcare response as soon as that wearable detects maybe there's an issue to address? How do you use data to automate autonomous driving and traffic patterns? How do you use data to automate all kinds of things? Automate the energy grid, automate production plants, the things that we kind of call the Internet of Things, which is really centered on real-time data analytics. And so our organization started as a meetup. It grew into a nonprofit organization with kind of our North Star is job creation. How do we help bring people into the technology sector, help them become comfortable with emerging technology topics and areas? We do a lot of education. We run other various exciting programs, and now we're operating in a number of cities across the United States. We've got a few of our team members here. But for a number of years, we ran a lot of events out of this building and across the Charlotte region, and we're really excited now to be back and see some familiar faces and meet a lot of new people. There's a little bit about data about us. I'm not going to dive real deep into this, but I just want to encourage anyone who's here in the audience that one of our core functions is helping people to connect to each other, helping companies to connect to each other, whether it's big technology platform providers connecting to entrepreneurs, whether it's municipal government connecting for public-private partnerships. We work in a lot of areas. Anything that you would call "quote-unquote" smart is that it's a good guess as to kind of the areas that we play in. We are, as I mentioned, a nonprofit organization. We are primarily a sponsor-driven organization. And so a lot of the logos you see on the screen are the folks that enable us to do events and programs that are always free, that are always open to the public. One of the barriers to participation in anything, whether it's entertainment, whether it's education, other kinds of things, often is a cost barrier. And we like to remove that cost barrier, operate everything as we can free. The Start Accelerator program we do is an equity-free program, not taking ownership of companies. We really are trying to make things accessible to anyone from any background, and it's really because of these folks. So maybe we can give a quick round of applause for the sponsors. This evening, we're at the Launch Factory. Any folks that have not been to the Launch Factory before? Quite a number of hands, so welcome. This is a fantastic facility, co-working space. Number of cool companies running out of it. One of them is a company called Secure Edge Networks that does a lot of managed IT services. They're the ones that are keeping all the IT running, and it's going to power an AI here that we'll talk about in a moment. We've also got a couple of special call-outs. John, right in front of me, John Petit, is with RevTechLabs. Founder of RevTechLabs, a software development shop that has built the AI that you're going to meet here in a moment. We also work with a company out of California called Roselli AI. Their kind of core skill set is they will take when you're doing text to speech, and it normally sounds like a robotic voice that's speaking. Give a little bit of a spoiler, it still sounds like a robotic voice, but they're working to add a more human-like voice to it and to skin individual people's voices onto AIs. So we work with them a little bit. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we're here this evening to talk about generative AI. Right? What right now, of all the various generative AI tools, there are many that are out there. The one that is definitely in the spotlight right now is ChatGPT. Anyone not familiar with at least the acronym ChatGPT?
Oh, sorry.
This is why we went into So we're not going to dive deep down into the technical weeds on this project. If you want to learn more of that, talk to John and to some of the other experts who are here. But the idea is we've had analytics, we've had machine learning, we've had neural networks, we've had these different tools for a long time. And we've hit this interesting inflection point, whether it was truly a technology inflection point or it's maybe more of a marketing awareness inflection point. We're going to ask our panel about some of that in a moment, but where there is a whole lot of buzz around generative AI, a whole lot of opportunities and benefits and some things that sound risky and scary. We're going to dive into that conversation. We've got some expert panelists that you can see in front of you, and we've got an AI sitting in that computer right there on the cloud that is going to be participating in this conversation. We have a few experts that come from different backgrounds. We're going to let them introduce themselves. We'll bring in our AI panelists and have a little bit of conversation. I'm going to ask a few kind of starter questions to get going, but then I do want this to be interactive, so as the audience has questions, feel free to ask questions and get involved. All right? Sound good? Fantastic. All right. Well, let's start at the far end. We'll work this way. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So Dan Roselli, I'm the co-founder of Packard Place here in Charlotte, the Entrepreneurship Center, RevTechLabs, the accelerator RevTechLabs chatbot, the venture fund. Used to be, got down here to be, worked for Bank of America, was a bank executive, then spun out and started my entrepreneurial career, was a co-founder of a company called Red Ventures and a couple other companies, and then started doing what we're doing now. Sarah and I, my wife and business partner, invest in more Charlotte startups than anyone else in the history of Charlotte's. And the accelerator we run is fintech and insurtech specific. So I think my role on the panel is I take a very broad view of this subject. I'm not a deep expert in this, but I think I kind of pull together the broader view because a lot of our startups deal in this space. So we'll see what I can bring.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Mary.
I'm Mary. I work for a software company called SAS. Anybody heard of SAS?
Software. Important right sponsor.
And analytics company. It was weird for me to join an analytics company 25 years ago because I'm not a quant. I've always been sort of a language person. And I got involved in natural language processing about 15 years ago. So I've been in and out of natural language processing for a long time. I also teach computational linguistics at Duke in the evenings. So all of my gigs pretty much revolve around all things natural language processing, text analytics, generative AI, and all of the interesting debates and concerns that that involves. So my poor children know more about this type of technology than any child should, but they also understand the risks. So take it with that.
All right, Tim.
Kevin Vaughn, I'm actually here in Charlotte. I work with Captcha Consultant. I've been toying, we'll call it toying, with generative AI for a few years now. And my passion has always really been around engaging experiences with users. And so having the sort of natural language as a means of interacting with our systems is immediately appealing to me. Once I started writing code for me, I was even more appealed by the idea. Once I got good at doing so, I was sold for sure. So got some of the depth, but from the consulting background, it's a large view of how do enterprises deal with this stuff and what are their real considerations and how they roll it out. And when you go to have the first conversation with them, what are all the things that they're going to object to?
Cool. Well, thanks all of you for being here. I'm realizing that we made a critical error that we didn't actually name our AI, but this is our virtual AI that we're going to bring in. And I'm going to switch to Tombot. Oh, is there a name? Tombot. There we go. Yep, this is why you should proofread your slides before your team. All right.
The cutoff to goatee.
The goatee has been cut off by the screen there. That's okay. That's okay. We got to differentiate the moderator from the bot. Right? So I'm gonna load that up while we're doing it. Let me ask each of you, if you don't mind, to just at a high level. So generative AI is kind of up the news buzzword, if you will. But we've been working on various and sundry forms of machine learning, AI. From your perspective, kind of what is your sense of the maturity of the technology? And you can think about that from a pure technology point of view, or you can look at it from a market acceptance point of view, however you like. Then maybe I'll start with you and ask you each, just kind of, where do you think that we are today in the AI journey?
It's really hard to think about maturity on where we are in the journey because I don't know really where we're going. It feels like every week there's certainly a new advancement that's not just a small shift, right? Here's the next day, it's another state-of-the-art advancement that's happening. Tomorrow's Google I/O. So as much as we may talk about what it's capable, what generative AI is capable of doing right now, tomorrow it's going to be inaccurate. So it's sort of a moving target. I think from a capabilities perspective, looking at the language models, they're very, very far along. It's hard to work with. I think working with them will get easier over time. And I think the ecosystem around them is very young. So you look at like AWS recently, announcing their Trainium and inference chips that are used specifically tailored to build and train these foundation models. And you look at the compute and the $45 billion training cost on GPT-4 that was reported out. That's not sustainable, right? But now it's been done once. What do we do with the technology? Now we can repeat, we scale it down, we make it faster, cheaper, better. So I think the ecosystem around it is very young, but that we'll see quick advancements on that front too.
Cool, thanks. Mary, what are your thoughts?
I actually agree. I think some of the things that people need to start thinking more about is what are genuine use cases. Like, everybody wants to be involved in GPT in some form or fashion, but where does it actually make sense? Because I was talking to these guys earlier. In my line of work, everybody wants to talk about GPT. It's the only thing they want to talk about in the NLP landscape, but GPT is just one hammer, it's not the only hammer. And there are other forms of generative AI that are also showing a lot of promise. In addition to the large language model side, which is actually my domain, there's also a lot of work being done on structured data generation. So maybe you are working, maybe you're doing something in healthcare and you're working on rare diseases, and there are only 100 people that have this specific rare disease. How can you create enough data that is viable to be able to model that rare disease? That's where some of these generative adversarial networks come into play, which is also a generative algorithm that does more on the structured side. So I think looking at the landscape, it is changing rapidly. I mean, like you said, it seems like every day somebody's got something new. It's the next big thing. Sometimes when you peel back that onion, you realize it's actually just the same thing, just repackaged in a slightly different way with a little bit better marketing. So peeling that back, but I've written a lot of blogs so far this year on GPT technologies, and I'm already having to go back and edit them to bring them up to date. So it's not like some of the things that I've done in the natural language processing world where you can leave it for about a year and it's still okay. Now it's if you leave it for 2 weeks, the information's outdated. So there are a lot of things to consider in that realm. That the landscape is shifting very quickly. It's still in its infancy, so it's going to be amazing to see what we do 10 years from now.
We're
Where are we?
right at that inflection point of the hockey stick growth.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Like I said, I've often referred to natural language processing in my world as the other analytics, because typically at SAS, it's been all machine learning all the time. So my machine learning counterpart gets 50 developers, I get 10, because nobody ever cared about language. Language is sort of an afterthought, and in a lot of organizations, they'll collect an insane amount of text data, but they don't know what to do with it. And they haven't often seen the value that text brings to the table. Now they do. Or at least now they want to talk about it. But now it's just a matter of figuring out what the use case is. Is it a GPT hammer or is it something else?
Whenever I do presentations or talks, I got to talk in stories. I'm going to tell 2 stories to kind of describe where I think we are in the phase. One of my favorite slides to put up on when I do presentations is a map of the United States, and I'm going to get this wrong, but there's a dot in UCLA, a dot at Los Alamos, a dot somewhere at the University of Utah, the little triangle. And I'm like, does anyone know what this is? And we have no idea. I'm like, that's the internet. Those are the first 3 nodes, Los Alamos, UCLA, and University of Utah. No one could look at that map and then predict where we are today. I think we're in a very similar spot in AI. I think people are seeing the potential of it. I think this is way, way, way early. And if this is recorded and we look back at this in 20 years, I think that'll bear out. The second thing I'll say is, have you ever seen the graph talking about the hype curve of new technologies? I think we're rapidly going into that hype phase, which is blowing up whatever things it's going to be, and then a year from now, people will be going, why didn't, generative AI deliver on its promise for society? Right? Those were the headlines next year, the next 2 years. It's going to go away for about 5 years, and then all of a sudden it will come back fully fleshed out and gone. It happens with technology all the time. So I think we're in the beginning of the hype curve. I think it's going to disappear for a little while, not for people really working on it, and then 7 years from now, people are going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe that this is doing this for me in my life.
Yeah, totally. Last year, we were on the hype curve for the metaverse. The metaverse right now is in that trough of disillusionment, right?
Yeah.
Yes, maybe this is going to follow. So let's ask the AI 2 quick questions. First, we'll start with something fairly specific, right? It's as we think about like what was the capability. I'll start with a more specific question. So let's ask, how old is the field of generative AI? And so our question goes in. Mic turn. Give it a minute. I couldn't tell if the color changed. It takes
2023.
Today is 2023. Let's try again. I think I just clicked the microphone on. How old is the field of generative AI? Now the microphone color changed. You can be my quality control.
Generative AI has been around for several decades, but it has recently gained more attention and made significant progress due to advancements in deep learning. Some notable developments in generative AI include generative adversarial network scans in 2014 and variational autoencoders Vs in 2013.
All right, fairly straightforward, fairly specific, the kind of thing you might expect out of a search engine, right? Not a lot of opining here, just regurgitating some facts. So now let's try to ask it the question that we asked our panelists and see if we can get an opinion. How mature is the generative AI market? For one, we know the bot's a bot because it takes a while to think, right?
Generative AI has been around for several decades, with early work in the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds focused on rule-based systems and expert systems. However, the more recent advances in deep learning-based generative models, such as generative adversarial network scans and variational autoencoders Vs, have occurred mainly within the last decade. As for the maturity of the generative AI market, it is still a relatively new and rapidly evolving field, with many ongoing research efforts to improve existing techniques and develop new ones. While there are some commercial applications of generative AI, such as in content generation and artistic creation, the market is still in its early stages and is expected to grow significantly in the coming years.
So when we turned on the ability to hold context, it randomly and predictably will answer all your previous questions.
So there you have it. So there's a little bit of agreement here, right? It's a technology that's been researched for many, many decades, which is this is, the playbook for the hype curve that Dan talked about. This is the playbook. You saw it in nanotechnology, you've seen it in wireless communications, you saw it in the internet. Decades of research that then hits a hype curve that then typically underperforms for a while, but then creates a solid foundation upon which a lot of stuff builds in the future. It's kind of niche weird, so that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about applications. So where right now are any of you seeing like real applications, real benefits that are coming out, Mary? I'll let you lead.
Well, if you are familiar with SAS, we're a programming language. At the heart, there's a programming language. It can be considered cryptic to some. So one of the things that we're looking at is taking the ideas that are with ChatGPT, that it's really good at generating Python code. So that will allow me to train it on SAS code. So instead of having to figure out how to write macro code, I don't know if any of you have ever had to write macro. It's not very much fun. I'm not very good at it. I've been in SAS for 25 years. So if I can get something that will generate good macro code for me, I'm here for it. So very targeted use cases. SAS is a very risk-averse company. We want to make sure that when we release information for our customers, or release models for our customers, that the results that they get are correct. Generative AI, model reproducibility, correct, hallucinations, there are some challenges there. So at the end of the day, we have to temper what we're doing with the generation with the value that it's going to bring. Getting something that's going to generate code, that's pretty easy because people are going to verify that. You're not going to just pick up a piece of code that's generated for you, plop it into a production system, and say, "Yay, it works." You're going to test it.
We've done that. That's a mistake.
Stack Overflow makes to different ones.
Hopefully you're not. But humans are going to be in the loop in some cases. And hopefully most cases. So when it comes to the use cases, what I see is not necessarily taking the boil the ocean approach that ChatGPT does, where you're able to ask it anything from any domain and have it generate a response, whether it's good or bad. Some of the use cases that we're seeing are more targeted. So take the boil the ocean approach in order to figure out how to generate the language, but then fine tune it on data that's much more specific and targeted for use case. So we were talking earlier about whether or not these types of technologies are going to eliminate all jobs in customer service. And my feeling is it's not yet. Most people want to have some sort of interaction with a human. And there are, even if you can train on a lot of customer service data, you're still going to run into edge cases that are going to need some sort of human intervention now. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll be talking about different things. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe 2 years, who knows? Things are shifting so dramatically. I did have a very large customer come to me and say, "We want to put ChatGPT on our external website to serve our customers." And I was like, "Do you now?" Because that seems very risky. And not only that, the cost. Beyond all the other things that can go wrong, is there an ROI there? Because a lot of people are so comfortable with the idea of ChatGPT, log in, you have access to this really powerful engine that can answer your questions for you. You give it a thumbs up when it gives you a good response. And a lot of people don't understand that you're training their model. They're not being nice to you, they're using you. By reinforcement learning, it's all of that. So on your website, you're going to have to pay for it. And those are things that people are failing to truly grasp. There is a significant cost with many machine learning models, and this is not different from that. You also run into the challenges with people specifically trying to engineer prompts to get your bots to do things they're not supposed to do. So that introduces risk. So most of the use cases that I'm seeing right now, actually most of the people that I'm talking to right now are trying to figure out what truly valuable ROI-driven use cases really look like. There are manufacturers that I've spoken to that want to look at early detection, and they collect a lot of data, and they can have more text involved, more generative text to send out alerts in more of a human communicative kind of way. Those are things that are of interest to them. But most of the conversations I'm having right now are just helping people understand what the different tools and toolbox are and how you can use them. And then we'll figure out what's going to be truly viable. So when we talk about where the market is, in my world, it's incredibly immature. There are a lot of companies that are, I spoke to a customer last week who basically said, we are.
I want to build a new story today. I used to work for M&M Marshall, which is a great, those are great SaaS M&M stories. SaaS did still do, give out free M&M, the biggest single client M&M market, free. How many of you were not born by 1997 or after 1997? You supposed to be about where you are. 1997, I worked for M&M Mars, and I got the assignment to go build the first ever M&M's website. And I asked them, and I've been ChatGPT on your website, well, what's the objective? What's the strategic objective? To have a website. It was literally the intro. So, to have a website for M&M Mars. So, yes, that happens all the time. I think the question is really is like, I'm going to do the analogy back to blockchain. There was a point in time about 5 years ago, especially in the fintech space, where more than half the companies would introduce themselves as we're a blockchain company. And what I said is there's no such thing as a blockchain company, right? Blockchain is a tool to facilitate you doing something else that has value and use to people. I think AI is the same thing. There is no such thing as an AI company. There can be great startups that use AI to go do X, Y, or Z and facilitate the process, but it's an underlying technology, it's not a fundamental reason to be a company. I'll give you one last really interesting story. I was just talking to this founder today. It was in a program 3 years ago, kind of ahead of his time and ahead of the curve. And when he's pitching to people, the large corporation is to be able to analyze, kind of in deep natural language sense, all of the searches that all the research analysts were doing, and all the results and all the internal chats back and forth about that research, so that they can present the big picture of what the organization is thinking as a whole versus what everyone analyst is doing. This analyst, think of an organization has hundreds of analysts. This analyst in here has no idea what this analyst is thinking, doing, the angles they have. And they just hit a brick wall on trying to sell that into companies. And so I'm talking about ChatGPT. Now everyone wants to talk to them because, like, well, could you do that ChatGPT thing in our internal natural language data? So it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, it's fascinating how quickly all of a sudden you realize, oh wait, now I can generate that 50 million. Are there specific verticals, Kevin, that you're seeing? Like early adopters?
Fintech is definitely the hardest one for sure. I think looking at use cases that are content generation, marketing areas, it's much easier to take that in, right? You're doing copywriting, things like that. One of our clients used this fine-tuned GPT-3 at the moment, and they took certain customer reviews, right, customer responses, and there was tens and thousands of these, and they went through and used the GPT technology to analyze the sentiment and pull out key things about their products that they have, key features that are relevant, so that they could just summarize that up. Kind of think of if you had Amazon, right, you're looking at all those reviews, somebody actually read through the 50 pages of them, threw out everything that was garbage, took all the good stuff, boiled it down to about 5 words, and said, here, this is what you actually want to know about this product. That saved them. They said it was going to take 11 years. It would have taken 11 years to do the amount of effort that it took 4 months to do with one person. So significant gains there. I think a lot of the use cases that are gaining early traction are the ones that are less risk averse, that are all internally focused. So know your data is a big use case, right? How do I hook up ChatGPT to all of those things aside? How do I hook up ChatGPT to all of my data, right? Not just all the metrics and everything I've been reporting, but my knowledge bases, everything that's unstructured. You have Microsoft coming with 365 Copilot that basically gonna eliminate 90% of what I spend time doing that I don't want to spend time doing, which I think is going to be great. Right? It's going to unlock a lot of potential with just the know your data. I think you'll get to faster insights as a company because you'll have more breadth of information, you won't miss things as much, and you're going to be faster. You won't have to have 17 different meetings to try to reconcile different conversations that have happened. You'll be able to service that as that's coming into the system.
We hope so. I hope so.
It's certainly the goal.
So let's ask the chat about data limitations. What are the biggest data limitations for ChatGPT? Time is one of the big ones, right? It's not trained in real time, so it's relatively older.
As a scanning language model, ChatGPT's biggest data limitation is the quality and quantity of training data it receives. The model needs large amounts of diverse and high-quality text data to learn from in order to generate accurate and coherent responses. Additionally, the model may struggle with understanding context, sarcasm, or other nuances of human language that are not captured in the training data.
You think?
So John and I were talking about this, and I was asking him some of the technical specifics. They are using the GPT-3.5 model behind us. So you use ChatGPT, you open it up. If you don't have the ChatGPT Plus, you're on this 3.5 model. Does anybody here actually use ChatGPT Plus and GPT-4 model? A few people. So this is very GPT 3.5. GPT-4 is going to answer this and not try to say it doesn't understand context or sarcasm. It's going to express all of those things extremely well. So I think that's something to keep in mind here as we interact with our AI partner.
Yeah, so way cheaper.
Significantly. 50% 50 times.
So this is actually top 3.5, it's not actually.
So this is yeah. So, do you want to just quickly describe what this is and what it's not?
Yeah, so the general architecture is, we take audio from the front, send it to, OpenAI that, or Whisper API, we get the text back, we send that back to OpenAI with ChatGPT 3.5, which then sends the, response to Resemble.ai actually, and we get the answer in text and audio form back from Resemble.ai, and then play it this way.
So, part of that decision-making process, again, is, the cost of these tools. There's a massive, I'll call it land grab going right now to get people using it and hopefully embed into their businesses these tools before one day they'll find out, oh, there's a big price tag associated, right? Mary, I don't know if you have any sense of, just to what extent the market is being subsidized right now.
It's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah. I mean, so, like I said, people don't understand the scale that a real production environment can be. And they'll talk about, oh, well, it's just pennies per token. Well, a token is like a word or sometimes even punctuation. So you can go through hundreds of thousands, millions of tokens really quickly. And the conversations that we're having here tonight would start versioning on pretty expensive. When you start breaking it down by that. So that's, it's something that OpenAI did something that has really shaken up the open source market. Because Google was always nice. When it comes to large language models, Google's like, oh, we developed this cool thing called Transformer. We're going to share it with the open source community. And the open source community said, okay, cool. And then Google said, we're going to take the architecture for this Transformer model that was really good at doing machine translation. And we're going to break it apart. We're going to give you the encoder part. And the encoder part is going to be really good at doing things like summarization and classification of your data. And then OpenAI said, we're going to do the decoder part. We're going to generate text, because that's what that piece is really good at, good at generating the output. Everybody sort of expected that OpenAI would follow Google and say, here, open source community, have this, make it better. And they didn't. And that has created a lot of animosity in the open source community because they have shut down the technology. And it actually happened earlier than, this is not a recent thing. With GPT-2, OpenAI thought, we don't want to make this available to the general public because there's too much of a risk of bad information being spread. We're worried about misinformation, bad actors, and spreading information in a way that sounds so confident people believe it. Then the open source community said, oh, we don't like that, so we're going to take this idea of this decoder-based transformer model and we're going to build ourselves. The challenge is they didn't have the funding. So you end up with something like GPT from AI, which is also working with the Databricks folks who are building Dolly. They work with AI to pull in some of the open source components. But you end up with a model that is okay. It's not great. It's got a fewer number of parameters, but it's free. So now the open source community is outraged because now there's this huge partnership with Microsoft, and they're getting a lot of funding, and they're using the general community to train the model. And people should stop using OpenAI's implementation, but that's not going to happen because ChatGPT is cool, and it works. It's interesting, and people enjoy playing with fun. And so I think what we're going to start seeing is the open source community really banding together to try to figure out a way to be a GPT killer, but they're not going to. It's going to be really tough because the funding is not there. And so this takes a significant amount of data to train, and then there's a compute to run it. And that's where the partnership with Microsoft's really paying off with OpenAI, because they're bankrolling, all this compute. So they're giving, an opportunity to kind of seize the market, like you said, give people a little taste to show how cool this is, and then pop in the price tag later and say, oh, you can't live without this.
I think that's really, I call ChatGPT the hardware for the technology, right? It's very good. It's a very capable chatbot. You don't need it on your website because it's already on the website. Right? That feature already exists. You don't need to have that. But it did place in front of conversation. Right? Used it, you're all here. You can have the conversation. I've been banging on the AI door for a while with clients, and they're not getting in a lot of places. suddenly ChatGPT comes along and everybody's like, hey, let's talk about AI.
You know the model you guys are describing is go-to-market strategy? Save the drug dealer's shoes.
Yes,
So Kevin, let me ask you, so one of the things I think is really interesting is how accessible the school is.
Yeah.
Right, my wife was a high school English teacher, uses a computer, she has basic computer literacy, but not a computer enthusiast, like, around the out partying and other things. This ChatGPT he comes around, and she's using it, she's playing with it, she's experimenting, And I heard somebody recently describe, they likened it to the very early days of HTML, where, like, initially, it took some expertise, but eventually, almost anyone could make a web page. And then you had, web page builders and wizards. As you look at it, you've got this expertise now, you're talking to clients, you could bang on the door, maybe they're starting to open the door now. Is there concern that it's going to rush right past them?
I mean, already can do it yourselves. You don't take away the OpenAI, you take away the 6, maybe dozen or so groups that are training the truly large foundation model that's underneath there. And even to that end, Amazon's got Bedrock coming out where you're going to be able to click on your way through to your own foundation model. It really doesn't take a lot of technical skill to jump into the deep end of this. It takes money to make up for whatever skill you don't have.
Yes.
But if you have the knowledge, you can counterbalance that by some of the on the cost of the GPT models. GPT 3.5 is cheap, right? You can, for $1, you can generate 700 pages worth of text. It's a lot of text. The GPT-4 model, they've got one that's got 32K context windows, really not available to many people yet. But $1 gets you 15 pages of text. So the price disparity there kind of gives you a sense of what that sort of subsidizing is. But you can get GPT-4 to do a lot of stuff that you just can't with the other models. The thing to do though, from a productionalizing standpoint, is to figure out how to get it to do it, and then do a lot of prompt engineering, a lot of actual engineering to get the cheap models to do that as well. Because a lot of them are capable of even GPT-J, which you go to interact with it, it feels like you're interacting with a toddler. I've got a 2-year-old, I'm continually liking the development of these and interacting with them as I've watched my own daughter grow up for the past 2 years. So, you can get the toddler to do the thing you want it to do. It just takes a lot more effort than just talking to the college kid. Right? In some cases, awesome.
So let's address one of the elephants in the room of generative AI. Is the same elephant that's in the room for just about every major technology shift, which is time and time again we think, well, technology is going to enable jobs, right? And then what tends to happen is instead technology augments ourselves, and suddenly we don't see blurry because we're using technology and we can see clearly, or we're et cetera, et cetera. All the writers are on strike right now, mostly because they're not getting a fair share of Hollywood profits, but in part because they're worried that Hollywood is just going to use generative tools for script writing, et cetera, et cetera. Like, kind of where, what views do you have? Again, I'll ask you first. Like, what do you think is changing? What are people worried about? What concerns are people bringing to you?
Yeah, and you mentioned the job thing. I happen to believe that technology will always advance our productivity as a species. I think that will be a net positive thing. There will be disruption, there will be pain with that disruption, but net and long term, it's always going to be positive. Really, I have a glass half full portion of that one. I guess in our space, the fintech space, no one really talks about some of the negatives of AI and the world stuff. I think the one that I hear the most is that companies are going to blindly take what's generated by AI and think it comes out perfect and just use it. And so I think there's going to be a whole industry that happens that we're the ones who can take this great information, put the human safeguard in it, to then let it be productive for your end user. And I think there's going to be a whole crop of startup models, all based on being, we're the safeguard against this really powerful tool so it doesn't destroy your house.
Could we then apply that to social media? Sorry. Very thoughts around kind of, job displacement, adjustments, role changes.
I think a lot of that. I mean, I agree that productivity is going to be one of the big driving factors, but I think one of the big challenges that we run into is the fact that people don't understand how it works, and people don't understand things, they're afraid. And that's where we are right now. And I was telling these guys earlier that I get dragged into Facebook conversations because I'm old. And sometimes it's like some of these folks are wearing their tinfoil hats and waiting for sentient AI to come take over the world and decimate the human population. And I have to go in and say, let me explain how these models work to help you feel better. Because at the end of the day, there is still a human in the loop. Because with all machine learning, there is labeling of training data to get the good results. Somebody has to label the training data. And then we go down another route and we're like, okay, well, if somebody's labeling the training data, my feeling is he who labels the training data controls the narrative. So that is something to be concerned about. And one of my favorite examples is a political one. I don't care what side of the fence you sit on. You can probably figure out which side of the fence I sit on. But if you ask ChatGPT to give you a poem about Joe Biden, ChatGPT will happily give you this beautiful flower poem about Joe Biden. If you ask it to do the same thing about Donald Trump, it comes back and says, well, you know, I'm an AI engine. I don't have the ability to get involved in political debates. Wait a second. Just did. So there are some concerns that I have in looking at the way generative AI is rolling out. Some of the concerns I have, of course, the things that are brought up by everybody's legal departments. Who owns the training data? Where did OpenAI get it? Who owns the copyrights on that data because it's not OpenAI? Whose websites did they scrape? Is your information in the model? Probably. If you have any information on the internet, you're probably in ChatGPT in some form or fashion. And at the end of the day, who's labeling the data? Because there have been some concerns raised about how the toxicity was limited by OpenAI and how they label the data. They paid Kenyan workers not very much to go through the worst of internet data to label it to prevent it from entering the model. So basically, you're talking about child abuse, all kinds of things that these Kenyan workers were exposed to for 12 hours a day, every week. So you've got workers that have PTSD. And I do a lot of work. One of my passions in my job, something that gives me purpose beyond technology, is humanitarian work. So I've done a lot of work on natural disaster relief and recovery. And one of my recent projects actually has nothing to do with machine learning. It is natural language processing. But it's working on fighting child sexual exploitation. So finding child groomers. And in order to do that, we have to be exposed to really horrific data. Like the worst thing as a mother, things that I would never want to see. But knowing that I can be involved in a process that can help determine whether or not a predator on the internet is speaking in a fantasy situation versus an active situation. Are they actually engaged in doing something horrific to a child? And being able to write linguistic rules that can taper that. I also have protections in place. So, my company makes people available to me to talk to if I need to work out some of the issues that I'm seeing in the data. These workers didn't get that. And those are some of the people concerns that I have. I mean, it has less to do with AI taking over the world or, even the data privacy. I mean, that stuff, the courts can figure that out or not, or just let it pass and figure, a lot of that's not going to be solved anytime soon. But my concern is who's labeling the data? What's their motivation labeling the data? What are they trying to keep me from being able to see? And the people that are tasked with looking at the worst of the worst, how are we protecting them? To make sure that in creating this model that is, is a beautiful thing that solves a lot of problems, how can we engage in artificial intelligence and minimize harm? And those are some of the conversations that my humanitarian part isn't getting great answers to right now. And those are some of the things that I like to insert into conversations because there are aspects of AI people don't think about because people don't understand how models work. So they don't understand that somebody's labeling data somewhere, that it's not just happening automatically. I mean, there are some supervised or unsupervised ways you can label data, but in general, when you're trying to get something to create language, you want that data labeled by people because it's going to be that humans understand language in a way that machines typically don't. So that's my soapbox. Sorry.
The term auto magically is fantastic. And no, it's a great point. Let's ask another question of the AI here, and then I want to open up to the audience. Let's try. Give an example of a use case where it would not be appropriate to use generative AI, and therefore we might want to ban or regulate it.
The CEO of OpenAI says it's the label, don't worry about it.
Bad data. It's the garbage in, garbage out, right? Bad data in, bad data out. See if we stumped it. It was too long a question.
Buying more time. That's the other side of the ChatGPT partner too, right? Its experience is phenomenal to be able to go in and interact with AI like that. But yeah, the labeling, supervised fine training, all of the garbage, and then reinforcement learning, that's what made it work really well, right? And that's sort of overlooked when people are just kind of like, oh, these really be able to great.
And people also the people that don't like, and I may come across as a little negative about generative AI, I'm really not. I think it's amazing and interesting. I just have a lot of questions. But people also are really quick, if they don't like the technology, point out hallucinations. And, well, it gave me a wrong response, and it did it in a very confident way. Well, you know what, people do the same thing. So people are not always right. And my baseline in unstructured data analysis is always 80%. You know, if I can get 80% accuracy, I feel pretty good about what I've done. Because at the end of the day with language, unless you were there, you're the person who wrote it, or you know who wrote it, it's all open for interpretation. I mean, I look at something, you can look at something, and we may have completely different ideas about what that something says. So how are you going to expect a machine to make that kind of determination? It's not going to. So, you know, we talk about all these error rates, and, you know, people are like, oh, it's giving me all kinds of that. Well, yeah, and it will hallucinate very confidently, but people do the same thing. And so, what are we willing to accept? And those are the conversations as a product manager at SaaS. Those are the ones I'm having with my R&D team. Like, they want, you know, next to no error. You can't get next to no error unless you're overfitting your model. I mean, hands down, that's the only, if you're fitting your model to the data so fantastically that you're getting like a 95% accuracy rate, then that model is not going to generalize very well at all. So we have to temper that and understand that when we're talking about generating language, there's going to be error. And we have to figure out what the threshold is for accepting that. If I'm trying to create some sort of a medical bot that's going to, you know, be my next step into a medical provider, I don't want any error. You know, so maybe that's not the right place for generative AI. Customer service, if it's a little off, people are often a little off. So, you know, where's the risk? You know, how do you temper that? And what are you willing to accept? Because people say wrong things all the time. We're like, oh, okay, we're just making a mistake. When a model does it, look at Bard, look at Google Bard. You know, we've grown so familiar and comfortable with the idea that ChatGPT is going to give us errors. They were like, oh, you know, it's just sort of an accepted thing. Google goes to launch Bard, it hallucinates on stage. Everybody's like, Bard sucks.
Yep.
It just doesn't. It's terrible. Is it? Did anybody see the Bing implementation, the first one? That was creepy. You know, so there have been a lot of very positive things happening, and there have been a lot of lessons to learn. You know, Microsoft quickly learned that filling your responses in Bing with a bunch of creepy emojis, people don't like that. And it really made me question my own emoji use. When I use a little smiley face to offset the snarky thing that I said, I'm like, come on, I'm Bing. I don't want to be Bing. So,
I would have bet huge money that they would never bring the big brand back. The fact that they're putting their name on that was amazing. But anyway, let me see if I can fix my language mistake and ask a simpler version of my question. For what use cases should we not use AI? See the short version or something like that.
Because this panel discussion has been a laugh.
Even the phrasing there is interesting because these models do better when you speak it.
Several use cases where AI should not be used, including 1. Critical decision-making in areas such as healthcare or legal systems, AI models may have inherent biases or inaccuracies that can lead to incorrect decisions. 2. Tasks requiring human empathy and emotional intelligence. AI lacks the ability to understand and respond to complex human emotions and situations. 3. Processes where human oversight is required. AI may make mistakes or errors that require human intervention or correction. 4. Activities that infringe on privacy or civil liberties. AI should not be used for surveillance or profiling that violates personal privacy or civil liberties. 5. Situations where the costs of implementing AI outweigh the benefits. AI should not be used if the cost of development, implementation, and maintenance is greater than the potential benefits.
We have a capitalist.
I feel like I just heard the law of robotics.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. That's right. The 3 laws are out of 5 use cases. My questions or thoughts? Perspective, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. To the gentleman, Dan,
Yes.
you say you work with companies, so do companies even care about like the dangers of AI? Like everything you mentioned here, I've seen companies say that like they're trying to fix this. CEO of Google just put out a report, and he said in an interview they don't even understand how AI is getting to the point where it can be trying to get to learn for itself. And the interview say, well, how can you put out something that you don't even understand how it works? Because he said we don't know, and he's like, well, we don't know how human brain works. So do companies even care about the mistakes, or is it just that they're trying to get money? You look at cars. I know you all talk about it taking jobs. To me, it's not a matter of will it happen, it's happening. Walmart is switching in cars drive itself, and then they're talking about using AI to detect cancer. So do companies even care about mistakes you see, or is it just more about the money and how much they can put out without
Great question.
So it works with a lot of big companies, right? I like the comment you made earlier, that you advise your clients to be, you use this term, fast followers, right? So that the idea of being on the bleeding edge, the first adopters, just ends up being train wrecks. But what I want to do is watch the train wrecks go by, and then watch people go on the train track and it looks okay. It's like, okay, now I'll get on the train track and follow. That's really the right strategy, in my opinion, for most big corporations. I think, I'm going to make a very opinionized statement here from my own personal perspective. I think when you see big companies using it, it's not about the dollars. I think it's probably about one senior executive's ego, who wants to be seen as cutting edge, doing things fast. And I think most of that is happening through corporate ego, not through corporate greed. And I think in that case, yeah, kind of consequences be damned, this will be good for my career, my advancement. Look, I can say I was the first one that implemented this in this space. That's my personal opinion.
It's also good for talent attraction. Companies, I think, I believe sometimes do this to get young workforce interested in working for an old brand.
I think the thing with AI I'm most concerned about is AI impersonating you and coming up with fake information.
Yeah.
So there's obviously information on your behalf, but with voice and even video, right?
Image.
Yeah, video and images. People like, imagine that my wife gets a call and it's somebody that sounds like me and says something about I have an emergency or makes up something. Like, have you guys thought about it? Like,
It's the combinations that scare me.
yeah, that is really like,
Those are the ones that give me pause. I mean, my husband also works for SAS, so I said our kids. He said, well, you know, what if somebody takes a photo of me after I've been drinking, and then they combine that with data that says I've been drinking and driving, and now I've got this convincing, you know, thing that can live in perpetuity on the internet.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, probably nobody's gonna care about you, but that's okay. But those are really valid concerns. And for me, when it starts getting in, language is one thing, text, ChatGPT, you know, generating text that we're reading, I'm less nervous about that. Start combining that with voice. And one of the areas of research that I find fascinating, one of the things that, and I've mentioned this to some of the panelists, I really find it fascinating to as somebody who works with a lot of linguists and works with the linguistics department at Duke, trying to figure out how to make a machine really sound like a human. and not a robot. Like even if you think about Alexa still sounds a bit robotic. Siri, they're still a robotic type because when humans talk, we inflect words in different ways, and sometimes you can tell where somebody's from based on how they're inflecting their words. And there are logical pauses, and they draw out certain things, and when you are ending a sentence, generally you have an inflection that happens, unless you're, I'll make fun of Zoomers who like to punctuate all sentences with an uptick, which makes it sound like everything is a question. It's not a question. But you know, being able to imitate that level of human speech, those are areas of heavy research right now. So the GPT, the GPT stuff, that's going to continue to evolve, probably very quickly. The areas that I think are most interesting are the ones where we really try to hone in on making computers sound more human. And when we talk about computer science or customer service, you know, are you going to want to call your cell phone company and go through an automated menu where it's actually a person who sent it? Do you know if it's a person or not?
Yeah.
And do we want to get to a point where we do have these interactive menus and it really does sound like a legit human being? So you think you're yelling at somebody, but you're not hurting his feelings because it's just a machine. You know, so those are areas that I think, like I said, from my humanitarian ethical side, those are the areas that I'm most concerned with. The images, the production of images, the computer vision stuff is really fascinating. Right now, if you look at a lot of those images that are generated, they're terrifying because people have too many teeth, they have too many fingers. Hands and teeth are the creepiest things about generated images right now, in my opinion. If you haven't seen the happy women eating salad, Google that because it's a lot of computer-generated images of very happy women eating salad, looking very excited about their salad, but they have like Leviathan teeth and very creepy hands. But that's going to get better. So I mean, all these things are going to get better, and these are conversations that we really need to have.
But by getting better, they're going to get worse.
Yes.
Because to the point you're making, there was a time in society where if it was in print in the newspaper, you could reasonably believe that to be true, right? And I think we're moving into a phase where it's going to be really hard to discern truth. It's already happened in so many ways that I don't even articulate because you all know it. And I think there's a real potential that we're going to default that everything we read and see with our own eyes is fake until proven true. I mean, that's for me when I think about this issue. We're heading towards that, and there's going to be a whole industry about this is the place that you can trust, whether it's New York Times or something else. And if it's there, and only if it's there, can you actually trust it? And everything else is assumed to be guilty and fake.
Would a society of skeptics be more or less valuable in our current?
How this happened?
So one thing to add to that, so we're working with a Japanese company right now. They run the teleprompter for prime minister and most large Japanese corporations. And they came to us and were like, hey, look, periodically somebody comes back from marketing or whatever and says, we gotta change one word in that whole speech. And then it's like, well, I guess we gotta get the prime minister back and his entourage and everybody else for the president of Toyota. And so they came to us and they were like, hey, can you help us look into how to do like ethical deep fakes for us to change like one word in these speeches and save these companies like tens of thousands of dollars to just redo everything. And a part of that was we're looking at how do we set up some sort of verification system where like somebody can look at that video and say like, okay, this is like officially approved by the Japanese government. Like this is put out by them, and we can trust it, right? Or Toyota or somebody like that.
But while we're on the topic, do you want to share a little bit of what you're doing in digital watermarking and some of those
Yes,
technologies?
yeah. So another area that we're working in is, which relates to that, is forensic watermarking of images and video content, right? So being able to say where did this come from, and then you have to destroy the content in order to destroy the watermark.
Finally, a use case for blockchain besides crypto.
Absolutely. Maybe one or two more questions. Yeah.
So how does generative AI differ across different human languages? And if it does, which I assume it does, is that going to exacerbate maybe differences between cultures and maybe wealth
we have a tendency to be in technology overall, regardless of where you are in the world and with technology, we tend to be very English-centric. One of the most bizarre use cases when it came to language was early on in Google Translate. The most widely translated book in the world is the Bible, Christian Bible. So when you do things like machine translation, you have to have parallel texts. So you have to have it in the original language and the language you want to translate into. That's just the way typical machine translation works. So early days of Google Translate, they used the Bible to train. That's one of the things they used to train. They also used other parallel texts. So you can look at things like Canada is a great example where you have a lot of government proceedings that are captured in both English and French. So you have a lot of parallel text there. Same thing across Europe. So you get parallel texts from government things. So in the early days of Google Translate, if you stuck to the more common Romance languages or German or English, your translations were decent. If you started asking for things like Scottish Gaelic, you would get things that sounded like biblical prophecies and apocalyptic doom because the languages weren't very well represented. So you end up in a situation where the translations just really weren't that good. But it was, I mean, that's also something that you can look at. It is creepily hilarious. But we run into the same things even now with machine learning. So you still have to have some level of training in the data. One of the languages I'm learning is Scottish Gaelic. So because I work with a bunch of linguists, I feel like it's my job also to understand a variety of different languages. I don't know why Scottish Gaelic, but it's just something that's to me. Because it's an unusual language. So I asked ChatGPT to tell me a little bit of stuff in Scottish Gaelic. It did a marginal job because it's not very well trained on it. If you ask it to do things in Italian, it does a much better job. So languages that are very widely spoken, it tends to do okay with. More obscure languages, not so much. So we run into that at SAS. We support 30 different languages. So we have, when we build out a language, we work with natural language speakers. When the war in the Ukraine happened, we lost our Kazakh expert. So we had to stop production, or stop some of the work that we were doing on a sentiment model for Kazakh because we lost the native speaker. So there are a lot of languages that are fairly well spread, but are still not very well represented in text data. So it's going to continue to be a problem. There's not an easy solution for it. And there are a lot of, I mean, OpenAI doesn't care about anything but English. You know, but there are companies that are saying that they are building the GPT killer in other languages. They're essentially using OpenAI's models, but they're training it using mostly government text as the parallel languages. One of my areas that I think is really interesting is also languages that aren't written. So how do you manage that? And then languages that are endangered, and looking at ways to use this type of technology to try to protect those languages. So can we capture enough data, especially non-written languages are much bigger challenge, but languages that are dying out that are written, can we use this type of technology to try to capture that, categorize it so the languages don't die?
This is going to be a great one for thinking back on tomorrow as our data becomes completely out of date on the next day. When Palm 2 is announced, if they announce it tomorrow and if they release the technical paper so you can see what went into it, it supposedly has 100 languages that have been robustly put into its training set. So that'll help. I don't know, are you, in terms of the sort of,
I'm skeptical about that.
I mean, you're trying to coach the question a little bit. If you have these different translated texts, right, you've got the English to German, and that's easy and good. If you've got German to Swahili, are you seeing that these models are able to do that sort of transference of that context between those? You don't need all of the combinations.
That's right. It's not always very good, but it's passable. And that's, in most cases, what people are looking for. So if you want to work with something like Swahili, it's probably not very well represented. But if you've got that crossover connection back to Swahili, you could at least generate something that will be passable.
So a Swahili poem about Trump is going to melt down the data set.
I'm an AI bot. I don't have people to get involved.
All right. So great conversation. As we wrap up here, Maybe just real quick, rapid fire, like what are you most optimistic about right now? What are you most excited to see these technologies enable? Start with you, Kevin, and we'll work over here.
Productivity, 100%. I mean, just in every way, shape, and form. I think the 365 Copilot, where I can drag and drop a Word document, a PowerPoint template, and it can automatically go and make whatever it needs to. That's a great productivity gain, but I think that if you look at interacting with these tools just through natural language, your applications that you build, instead of thinking about where's my menu go, right? Start thinking about how do I actually just talk to this? I'm going to talk to my application instead. Everybody gets more productive without it.
That's exactly what I want to do. So I spent a lot of time in between NLP working on visualization, and the future is conversational. Nobody wants a dashboard. They want to be able to query data in a natural language way and find the answer. So being able to tie together the unstructured and structured data to come up with a response, I think is going to be cool.
I'm gonna go off the board here and go, I think it's gonna enhance creativity, which sounds counterintuitive. I'll give a small plug for an event coming up next week. So I'm also a group called FinSiders, which is Financial Services Innovation Code. So we're sitting at the FinSiders board meeting, and our topic next week is AI's implication in financial services and fintech innovation. So one of the guys in the board, I was joking, right, because I joke a lot, and I said, $20 in it for you if you work a Terminator theme into the title of that event. So he goes, hold on. So he goes to ChatGPT and says, give me AI implications in banking and Terminator themes. And in 10 seconds, it goes back with 12 answers. So the event next week is called I'll Be Back. Implications of AI in financial services. And so it's not that it's really being creative, but it does allow to generate so many options very, very quickly. I think it's interesting for people who don't consider themselves creative, how they'll be able to utilize that.
Yeah, I love all the answers. I think you're all right. I'm a little bit again years as well. When we look at companies that we work with, when new technologies come out, almost always established companies first use the technology to improve the bottom line. They look at cost efficiency, how do you reduce price, improve efficiency. Those companies fail over the long haul compared to ones that instead use the technology to create new value, to do new things. But they're both incredibly important. Thank you so much to each of you for joining.